Hey, welcome. Welcome to Walking the Path. Okay, so if you've been trying to force clarity lately, has it felt like forcing clarity lately? Has it felt like trying to figure out intentions or purpose well, if you've been trying to force clarity lately and it's not working, don't worry, you're not broken. What I'm finding is that we're just in a season, you know? And the more I try and squeeze the answer, the more it ghosts me. So today I want to talk to you about how divine order actually shows up. That's the message today. How divine order actually shows up to how to notice what's emerging. Okay. So welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. And what this week I'm getting ready after this, I'm getting ready to go into rythmia to teach integration class. There's a ceremony tonight. The fourth ceremony is happening tonight. And so we'll do an integration with the folks that did ceremony last night, getting ready to go to their final ceremony. It's one of my favorite times because, you know, Thursday, about 50% of people have received a miracle at this point in the week. So like half the place is like, oh my God, last night was the best night of my life in my entire life. And then the other half are still in process. And so there's a little bit of um, old patterns show up for them, right? Like it's not going to happen for me, and everybody's getting it, but me. Those kind of old patterns. But the same things that happen at the retreat happen in life, right? So it's the very thing that's seeking to be healed that's showing up for them. And then about 40% of people receive a life-changing miracle on Thursday nights. So Friday, like the place is lit up. It's just people are just like, oh my God, I didn't know that this was possible. I didn't know that I could feel so connected and so loved and to have released so much, forgiven. So that's what's happening at Rhythmia. And check it out. If you're feeling the call of something in what I said nudges you, go check it out. It's a remarkable place. And I get to talk about walking the path every week under the auspices of Rhythmia. So, this week is about letting divine order or noticing what divine order is emerging. Last week, I talked about, letting it emerge, that it's not something we force, that it's not something that we can impose, but that it actually already exists. And being in alignment with it is what is actually creative. But um, thanks, Dorota. Yeah, she goes, everybody gets a miracle, nobody can see it immediately. I would agree with you. I would totally agree with you. Okay, so I want to talk today about noticing, right? So if we're in this place of like, okay, divine order is there, like the sun's rising, the waves are waving, the birds are flying, divine order exists. I just have to align with it and I'll get clarity about everything that I need clarity about, right? Okay, great. How do you do it? I don't know. No, actually, let me share with you what I've been doing. Um, First of all, alignment isn't mood. This is what I'm noticing. Alignment isn't mood. It's a relationship. So, I was completely uninspired yesterday going in to teach a class, the spiritual recalibration circle that I do on Wednesday evenings, completely uninspired. And yet that didn't mean I wasn't aligned. It was a great class. I even shared it with the class, like this is what came through is that, forcing clarity versus letting divine order emerge. If I was like, okay, I got to teach this class, okay, wrap it up. All right, let's fucking go for it. It would have been a different class. But instead of trying to force the clarity, force uh, a performance, it was authentic. And something really powerful came through in the class that night. It was really mellow. It was authentic because it was kind of where I was at. But by the end of the night, I was like, whoa. Everybody else was like, whoa. The sharing was amazing. The connection was amazing. The insights were amazing. So, um, thank you, Dorota. I love you too. forcing clarity versus letting divine order emerge, right? Alignment is not mood, it's a relationship. And as long as we're in a relationship, we can't treat clarity like Amazon Prime, with tracking and free returns. It doesn't work that way. I have to align with it and allow something to emerge. So I can't force it, but I align with it. It has nothing to do with my mood. The second thing I noticed is the trap that we get trained in, right? Overthinking, panic planning, spiral productivity. It's like, if I do not push, I'll fall behind. I got to push through this. I got to push through this. I got to push through this. I'm going to fall behind. It's a huge piece for me. And I noticed this week, actually 2 weeks, right? Because normally I would have had my intentions for 2026 done. This year, it felt more like January wasn't about declaring intentions. January was about letting things settle and letting this divine order emerge. And usually each month I have a statement that I work on. I have a intention for each month, and I work with that intention morning and evening after meditation. And I set, like, here's what I want to create. And then at the end of the month, I assess, was I able to create it? How far off, or did I exceed it? And this is helping me build the muscle of learning to create, learning that I'm creating my life experience. And for 2 years, every month I've had an intention. And at the end of December, the December intention was to write my book, to finish the book. And I finished the book, the first draft. And so I didn't know what, I was like, well, I have so many things I could create as my intention, but those all felt like they were coming from my head, my personality, maybe even conditioning. And I felt like I was in this feeling of what we're talking about, letting it emerge. So for 2 weeks, I haven't had an intention for the month of January, and I certainly haven't had my intentions for 2026. And it was in that waiting. And so if I, the idea is, if I don't push, I fall behind. But the truth is, you don't have to feel inspired to be aligned. You don't have to feel strong to be held. That some of the highest spiritual practices that I have found is not a ritual, but really it's in this place of waiting, and hold on, I just lost it. Give me a second. Downloading. Yes, if I don't push, I fall behind. And so as I didn't push, the perfect thing came forward. The perfect intention of what I wanted to focus on in this coming month, in the month of January, even though it's halfway through, but that's okay, right? So how do you recognize emergence without forcing? Well, listen instead of pushing. And listening is hard because we want the answer. Again, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this meditation. I'm going to get clarity. I'm going to do this breath work. I'm going to get clarity. I'm going to do this ceremony. I'm going to get clarity. Like, okay, in, out, very easy. Doesn't work that way all the time. Sometimes it does, but not all the time. And when you're in that, it means that we're just in a season, and it's okay. And as I can just listen, shift from living by the clock to living by resonance. So my calendar is not running my soul. If your calendar is running your soul, we need a freaking intervention. Okay, but we'll do it gently with snacks. It'll be all right. But our calendar doesn't run our soul. And living in this resonance, like, what supports me right now? I notice with my morning practice, I'm very disciplined, and I do, a set of things every morning. And this last couple of weeks, I've had a respiratory illness one week, and then I had some orthopedic stuff the next week, and some of my practices I couldn't do, and I found myself like wanting to, but it was like, really, what supports me right now? What is actually supporting me? Not just because this is what I do every morning, but right now, for what my body needs, for what I need. I'm consistent with my practice, but let's be a little bit more open to, recognize what's emerging without forcing it, like what's present for me. And so much of this comes from the body. But, I also, another sign that you are listening rather than pushing is that guilt loses its authority. When guilt loses its authority, it's like the courtroom drama in my head finally, closes, it wraps, and I don't need to justify being a human being. Then my inner critic is like my inner critic gets to be, doesn't get to be completely quieted, but the inner critic, I allow it to say what it needs to say, but it's no longer running the show, right? The guilt has lost its authority. And then another sign that you're listening rather than pushing. Another sign that you're listening rather than pushing is sensing together instead of controlling alone. Consensual leadership is this really cool idea that comes from equine therapy. I wish I could remember the lady's name. She was really cool. She developed this idea, but she worked with therapy in horses. But what she saw in horse herds was that the most productive herds did not have a dominant alpha. They had a what she called a consensual alpha, which she said con means with, sensual means sensing. So sensing together, sensing with, that if, let's say, you're in the herd of horses and you're the alpha, but I know where the water is in this part of the terrain. So you go, hey, lead the herd to water. And then when it's time, and then you take over. Maybe there's another skill that this horse knows where to find food, and so it depends. And so we're sensing together, consensual leadership. This is another sign that we are becoming more receptive to relationships, to team, to family, and letting the right part lead at the right time. This is another sign that we're living by listening rather than by forcing. Um, Another sign of listening rather than forcing is you'll notice that small acts create big openings. I had a client share that, instead of forcing divine order in his life, when he was really present with his body and sat like saw what would support me right now, that a lot of the things that he's been meaning to do sort of started to happen naturally. And one of the things he said was he had been meaning to organize his Tupperware drawer for a long time. And so he's been more into this mode, like we've been talking about this month, about listening rather than forcing. And so he'd been listening to his body, and it was like, oh, now's the time to clean the Tupperware drawer. And then what he noticed was cleaning and organizing the Tupperware drawer brought divine order to other areas of his life, and it made a difficult business conversation easier. He was like, I didn't understand, but I never would have guessed that cleaning the Tupperware drawer would have made the business conversation, the difficult conversation, easier. And that was one of the really cool things, another cool sign. I want to also talk about confusion is not failure. In other words, confusion in this process of listening instead of forcing, confusion can be a pattern breaking up. So confusion is not a sign that you're failing. Confusion is not the failure of clarity. Confusion means that that this old pattern is updating, and it's not. And don't unplug mid update, right? Like, confusion is a pattern breaking up. So if we're listening and it's not coming and there's confusion, don't give up hope. Actually, give up hope. We don't ever want to hope because we just want to know. We just know that comedy exists. Comedy. I just saw Richie V comedy. I just saw it. I was like, we know comedy exists. We do freaking know comedy exists. But we know divine order exists, and comedy is certainly an expression of divine order. Welcome, Richie. Right? So we know divine order exists. I don't want to hope that it's going to emerge in my life. I don't want to pray, beseech, beg, believe, have faith that it's going to emerge. I want to know. I want to know divine order is there. I know it's there. Maybe I'm not seeing it right now. So that means I get to listen. I don't want to force. I don't need to push. I know it'll emerge in the right time. And then that replaces the forcing. Instead, asking a question replaces the forcing. Instead of, what is my biggest intention? We start asking, like, what keeps returning when I'm not trying? What's quietly present that I want to hear more? So I was looking for my monthly goal, my monthly, I was talking about earlier. I just waited, and I was feeling nervous, like, oh, it's January 15th, or last night was the 14th. I still don't have it. And then it was like, oh, well, I've been thinking about a publisher. How do I go about that? I've got a couple different paths. I need to decide on that. And okay, there's my fire this month. It emerged. So this is an inside job, right? It's not the responsibility of circumstances and conditions to make you feel loved and accepted. It's not the responsibility of circumstances and conditions to give you clarity. But when we start to prioritize our own self first, our own needs, our own spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional needs first, that's real love. Then I can be of service to others. But when I do that, if I'm prioritizing everyone else's needs, I'm feeling abandoned, right? But when I start to prioritize my needs so that I can continue to be of service to others, then I have self-respect, I have boundaries, I have real love, which includes me, right? So I think this is our transmission for today. All the aspects of noticing when we're listening instead of pushing, listening instead of forcing. Listen to what's quietly been knocking at the heart, not quietly knocking on your soul. There's something in there that's genuine, that wants to be expressed. So as we begin to move into this period of crystallization, these last few weeks of January, a period of crystallization for your intentions for 2026. So start to observe what's knocking on your heart, what's knocking on your soul, what's been quietly trying to get your attention. And that's your intention for 2026. All right. Blessings. Thank you, Dorota. Thank you, everybody who joined. Peace and richest blessings to everybody.